وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I won't be needing the board anymore because the math is over, so you don't have to worry about doing any more math. I noticed that only 4 people have handed in the assignment. So whenever you hand in the assignment, I wasn't sure how quickly people were going to do it, but since mashallah 4 have already handed it in, I will send the people who handed in the assignment the actual answer so they can do a little bit of a comparison for their own knowledge and their own understanding of it. Please don't share it with those who haven't handed it in yet, just so that they can actually benefit from trying to do the work and learning how to do it. And towards the end, maybe the last session of the semester, I'll do a quick review of how to do these. It's a big bonus for you as someone who's learning a preliminary text of fiqh to know how to do a basic calculation of inheritance and bequests. I think it's very, very much worth your time and your effort, inshallah ta'ala. So what's left now? So we have now 6, counting today, 6 more lessons before Ramadan. Ramadan, maybe we'll do 1, maybe not, and then there'll be the exam right at the end of Ramadan, or after Ramadan, probably the first week of Eid. Then we have a week off. Within that week off, we may have like a general meeting for the Imam Development Academy, the IDA, and it'll be outside of this place. And then the third semester will start mid-May, inshallah ta'ala, and we'll let you know what the subjects are so you can make your choices, inshallah, earlier. But we knew that Ramadan was going to be in the middle of this semester, so we planned accordingly. All of us, all the teachers, all the faculty who are doing their subjects or courses, planned and knew Ramadan was coming, so they kind of figured out what to teach so that there would be enough time, inshallah, for people to take Ramadan off. It's hard to study, it's hard to teach during Ramadan. For me, I'm doing 3 things a day. It's impossible for me to do an extra 4th one, but we may end up just doing 1 session during Ramadan when I'm off as a revision. But the rest of the matan, because we basically did half in the first semester, and there's half in the second semester. But if you open any book of fiqh, the second half of the book of fiqh is less relevant, and that is not meant in any form of disrespect to the book itself. It's just a lot of these older books, written maybe 800, something around the 700 year ago mark, before a little bit longer, a little bit less. The second part of these books they talk a lot about ahwal shakhsiyya. They talk about personal finances and when it comes to family issues. It's very specific. The context of what the scholars are talking about is very specific for a time and place and culture and people's background. So a lot of it is just not relevant, and it'll take a long time for me to explain the relevance. I don't know if there's any benefit. I just don't see. I did it before. I didn't see the value in it. The feedback that I took, or I got surveying the people who attended it, felt like the second half was lacked relevance, and that they didn't really care to know all the context for everything that happened and all the rulings that existed 800 years ago, especially the ones that didn't have like clarity of evidence. That doesn't mean that these chapters are not important. No, they are. But I'm going to do a little bit of a jog through them, meaning I don't want you to actually study the book for this part. I just want you to go and refer to the slides. So the paragraph that I read in the slide is the one that I need you to know. The rest of the paragraphs you don't even need to look at. I may put like a point somewhere in the slides just to summarize an idea that maybe exists there. That's not worth going through all the details. So that's kind of how we're going to go through the rest of the chapters. Marriage and divorce may take 2 sessions, this session and the next session. And then the jinayat or uqubat, when it comes to punishment-worthy felonies, we'll go through that through 1 session, and then maybe 2 other sessions where we kind of wrap up a few more topics that exist at the end of the book. But marriage and divorce is definitely a huge one. This is very difficult. This is probably one of the most difficult ones to teach, just because of how different the way of marriage or the system of marriage is today in comparison to how it was just maybe even 1 century ago. So I'm going to be very careful on how deep I dive into this and how many opinions I offer. I'm going to stick to the Shafiee madhab, which is what we're learning here. Anything that is definitely worthy of pointing out that exists in other madhab, I will point out. Otherwise, I'll just kind of go through it. I need to understand the basics. I find that the majority of people don't know the basics when it comes to marriage, even those who have been married for a long time or those who are trying to get married. They don't know the basics of what their rights are, what their obligations are, and how it all works. So I think this is very valuable for us to learn. Definitely, it's very valuable to learn. There are many different opinions out there today, especially in the modern era with the modern scholars, regarding certain aspects of marriage that I'll point out, inshallah, as we go along, that actually goes against the consensus of the 4 schools of jurisprudence. Like, this is one of the very few chapters within fiqh where modern scholars have the bravery or the courage to actually go against issues that have consensus within the four schools of thought of jurisprudence. Now, every school of jurisprudence has within it 4 or 5 opinions, but then there's in each madhab there's something called al-mu'tamad, right? Al-mu'tamad, which is the prominent opinion, and I didn't talk about that last semester. I was going to leave it till this semester to explain to you. Within each madhab, what people really know is the prominent opinion, the mu'tamad, what the school of jurisprudence, majority of scholars finally agreed to be the way to go. That doesn't mean that there aren't other opinions within this school that have validity and have merit. So there are other opinions in the school, but the only way you would know them is if you studied that one school of jurisprudence in a bit more depth. So you studied a second degree or a third level book within that madhab. So if you study, for example, Mughni al-Muhtaj al-Sharbini within Fiqh Shafiee, he will point out what Imam al-Muzani would say, Imam al-Rafi'i would say. He'll give you the other opinions that exist within the school. And funny enough, all of the schools of jurisprudence have most of the different opinions that exist. But when they say there's consensus of the 4 schools of jurisprudence, when they say that, and when I say that here, I don't mean that the other opinion never existed before today. No, it did exist before today. 100%. It just was never the prominent opinion of any of the 4 schools. Does that make sense? So whenever you hear the word that the 4 madhahib have agreed to something, and there's a new opinion that one scholar is saying is valid, that doesn't mean that this opinion is completely new to Islam, that no one ever thought about before. No, it exists. And it exists within the schools of jurisprudence. And it may even have validity within the school. But that opinion, for whatever reason, just never made it to be a prominent opinion within the school. Does that make sense? That's very important for you to understand when we talk about the consensus of the 4 madhahib. It doesn't mean that the madhahib don't have other opinions inside of them that are acceptable. If you come to the Shafi'i madhab and you say, well, Imam al-Muzani says this, and it goes against what the mu'tamad is, what is the prominent opinion, going by his fatwa or going by his opinion does not remove you from the Shafi'i madhab. Doesn't make it you went against the madhab. No, you just went against the prominent opinion, and you took an opinion of a scholar within the madhab that has merit, that is very world-renowned and well-established, and someone who has the ability to actually give an opinion within the school without leaving the school. Yeah? And it doesn't really matter, even if you leave a school of jurisprudence, that's not a big deal. But I'm just explaining to you how the thought process and how the logic of this actually works. Most of what I share with you here is the prominent opinion of the Shafi'i madhab, what they agreed to maybe in the last 200 years. Again, because that's why when we studied Hajj, for example, in this text, Hajj, the scholar Abu Shuja', rahmatullah alayh, he gave the integrals to be 4 things. When the Shafi'i madhab today, the prominent opinion, at least for the last 300 years, is that it's 5 integrals. That halq is an integral. He didn't see it that way because that's what the prominent opinion was back then. So schools of jurisprudence, they grow with time. They do evolve and they do change because the prominent opinion can be one thing at one time and can change later on. And the beauty of studying these old texts is that you're literally looking into history. Like you're looking 800 years back into something that someone wrote that still is valid. The majority of it, 65% of what he said still stands today. And you can still use it as evidence, not a problem. I'm very impressed by that because anything aside from the Quran can't really do that. Like anything aside from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have that ability. Once 100 years is gone, it becomes what you can benefit from it is, you need a specialist. You need someone who understands exactly what they're talking about, whatever the discipline is. And for fiqh, for us to be able to go back and take a book that was written 800 years ago and still take 65% of it with face value without needing to do too much digging or research is actually very valuable. But that doesn't mean that the prominent opinion does not change. It doesn't mean that there are not other opinions. And if you studied the first semester with me, the first course, then you know that because I talked a lot about that. I would point out this is what the prominent opinion, this is what other Shafi'i opinions also say, especially when the issue became a little bit difficult for day-to-day practices. So marriage and divorce is one of those chapters. It's loaded. There's a lot in it just because of how complicated marriages can be. So this is not, again, this is a preliminary course. So I'm trying to go just through the basics. Not here to solve all the marriage problems that exist in the community. This is not going to do it through a preliminary study of Matan Abu Shuja'. Okay. So marriage and divorce is called كتاب النكاح وما يتعلق به من الأحكام والقضايا. يقول المصنف رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا بعلمه ولا يصح عقد النكاح إلا بولي وشاهدي عدل. So he talks here about integrals, or he talks about the arkan of aqd. So marriage is a contract. Marriage is a contract. That's what it is in nature. By nature, that's what it is. It's a contract. It's an agreement that two people are entering in and others are a part of as well. That's why marriage is a big deal. It takes because it's a contract. Any contract requires a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, and it requires a lot of thought because you're signing something and you're agreeing to something. It's not just we're going out. It's so much easier just to say that, like dating and going out. It's so much. There's nothing attached to it. I'm going out with you today. I'm not going out with you tomorrow. Done. I don't want to see you anymore. We're over. Nothing. We're not to see each other again. I'm actually going out with someone else now. It doesn't make a difference. It's very easy. There's nothing. There's no strings attached. When you talk about marriage is a contract. You're entering it. The goal of this contract is that it's a lifelong contract. I mean, this is here for life. That's the intention with it. That we're signing this contract and it's binding us for life. And that's a huge decision that you're making when you're actually saying that. So he says, rahimahullah, and a marriage contract is invalid without the presence of the bride's guardian and two upright witnesses. So these are the two things that the Shafi'iyya see to be integrals of the aqd nikah. Add to them, please, if you don't mind. You have to add two more things to this because this is not just what. So we need sadaq. So we need to have the mahr. There has to be a mahr within it. Now he didn't point it out because certain things he took as given. Like he would say certain things were just maxims. Obviously, there's going to be a mahr. So he's just pointing out the stuff that other madhahib, to a certain degree, don't necessarily agree with. So he pointed out the two things that other schools of jurisprudence don't see to be integrals. They left out the stuff that everyone basically sees to be integral, that are integral, which is the mahr. Everyone agrees to the mahr 100%, and everyone agrees to a sigha. So I would just add that if you're taking notes, because this is important, I'm going to ask you about that one. A sigha meaning there has to be a proper wording of acceptance and for marriage. And I'll explain to you what that means in a moment. Yes? Mahr, which is dowry. There has to be a dowry. Meaning there has to be an amount of money the man has to put his hand in his pocket. And he has to put money down as a gift, as evidence that he is willing to commit. This is very important because this is men commit when, this is how men commit. This is how men show commitment. It's through their wallets. That's what hurts them the most because they work to put that money together. So if they are actually serious about somebody, you want to establish that seriousness. But okay, we'll prove it through a gift. For no reason. I mean, there's really nothing. It's not payment. It's just a gift, but it's also her right. I mean, this is the right of a woman. She has every right, and she shouldn't accept marriage without having a mahr, without the man showing that he's willing to commit and put it up. It doesn't have to be an obscene amount of money, which is what's happening today, which is why marriage is becoming so difficult and why it's actually becoming so hostile as an environment in general. But it's there just to prove that this person is serious about what they're moving towards on, and that's very important. The other two, which is the sigha and the sadaq, these are two. Sigha, which is the wording has to be appropriate, and then the sadaq or the mahr or the dowry. Those two are agreed upon within the four schools of jurisprudence. I'm not sure. Okay, so here's just kind of a breakdown for your own understanding. The Hanafis specifically do not see having a guardian as an integral, even if the girl is young and a virgin. Even if it is her first marriage and she's very young, then the Hanafis still don't see that having a shahid, a wali, having a guardian, to be an integral for this marriage to work. Meaning she's able, if she has the obviously capacity to make these decisions on her own, if she's old enough. Every country has a different break off for these things. Probably 18 is what we would go by, I think, in this country. She's 18, then for the Hanafis, she doesn't need a wali. But that's only the Hanafi madhab. The rest all believe that it's a rukn, it's an integral for there to be a guardian. Now, why is there a guardian? The guardian is very important. The guardian is the man who looks at the other man. When a man comes to ask for a woman's hand in marriage, having another man speak to that man keeps it a little bit real. Makes it very clear that this lady has someone who looks after her, who protects her, makes sure that he understands. This vouching process of there being a man judging another man before he is able to actually marry a woman is very valuable. It's very important. The Hanafis didn't say it was a rukn, didn't say it was an integral, but just to make it easy in certain situations where it may be difficult to actually find a wali, to make sure that women weren't controlled. Now, even with all that, it still does happen where having a guardian can lead to something that is negative for a woman's choice of marriage, but to be clear, that's the reason for it. The reason for it is for the lady to feel fully respected. That this man is not just finding her, she's not stranded in the world alone. She's not in a situation where she has no one to look out for her, no one to support her, and no one to protect her, that she does have people to do that, and the guardian is there to kind of initiate that process and to hold the man accountable for how he's going to behave later on. It's a very powerful tool, and any man who's gotten married knows that it's actually valuable. Like any man who's married and has been married for a while knows that having that at the beginning was actually a helpful thing for his mindset to make sure. And once a man has a daughter, and once you have a daughter, you'll know that's important too. Meaning, those who don't like the idea of the guardian don't like it until they have daughters. Period. There's like literally the argument ends immediately. The moment they have a daughter, they don't care about this argument. They don't fight me over this anymore. Like, no, my daughter it has to be. No, get rid of the Hanafi madhab. No, we want only there to be a guardian, because once you have a daughter, you want that to be there. You want there to be that safety valve of making sure someone is involved in the marriage. So the Hanafis didn't remove it out of lack of respect of the concept, but rather to ease the process of marriage when they don't exist. So they see it to be a wajib or a high sunnah in their madhab. They don't see it to be a rukn or integral. So that means the contract itself is still valid for them, even though it's missing something important, but it's valid. For the Shafi'is and the Hanafis, Hanbalis and the Malikis, it's not. If there's no wali, there's no guardian, someone has to be at tomorrow, then the marriage contract is invalid. It doesn't even count. It's not marriage. So it's an interesting, important point. We'll come back to this in a moment. Now, I'll talk about this. I don't have it there because it's not that important. But for the two witnesses, the Malikis don't necessarily need the witnesses at the contract time. They require the witnesses to exist before the couple consummate their marriage. The Malikis don't require there to be two witnesses when the contract is being signed. They require the two witnesses to exist at some point between then and consummation of the marriage. At some point, there has to be two witnesses to say, yes, these two people are going to get married. It's something that's been agreed upon. But at the time of signing the contract, they don't require two witnesses. That's why, rahmatullah alayhi, he pointed out these two, la yasih, meaning a marriage contract is invalid without these two things, because that's the opinion of the Shafi'i madhab. And it's the safest of the opinions out there. And I think it's probably, that's why the Hanbali and the Shafi'is and Hanbalis are pretty strict on it. They agree on this. And it's a pretty good way of going by things to keep the marriage contract safe. I'll end with that inshallah. ويفتقر الولي والشاهدان إلى 6 شرائط الإسلام والبلوغ والعقل والحرية والذكورة والعدالة إلا أنه لا يفتقر نكاح الذمية إلى إسلام الولي ولا نكاح الأمة إلى عدالة السيد. So the bride's guardian and witness meet 6 conditions. It has to be a Muslim, it has to be mature, it has to be of sound mind, it has to be free, it has to be a male, it has to be upright. These are the 6 things that are required for the two witnesses there. Again, these witnesses and the guardian are there to serve a purpose regarding the man who's coming to ask for the woman's hand in marriage. You can call it intimidation if you like. I wouldn't be too against that if that's the reason, but it's more of it's more of an insurance policy. That when you came to ask for this lady in marriage, you spoke to a guardian, a male guardian, and 2 males who had all these very good characteristics. There were witnesses on what you promised that day and what you were going to come into, holding the man to a certain amount of behavior. Because once marriage happens inside the house, it differs. The moment 2 people are inside a closed home, behind closed doors, the dynamic of the relationship becomes quite different. That's why having these insurance policies, making sure that the man understands what's expected of him and who's expecting that of him, is actually very good. Because in moments of ease and love, and everything will go well. It's when people don't get along that you want to make sure that both parties will observe a certain degree of ethics. It will observe a certain standard of behavior regardless of what happens. And in the house, statistically speaking, and this is not even religious data, this is just normal data, women tend to be on the recipient side of abuse for over 90% of cases. So this process of a man judging the man who's coming asking for the hand of a woman in marriage, and 2 male witnesses who are doing the same thing, is there to ensure that the safety of the lady at home will be held on to. The condition of being a Muslim is not required for the bride's guardian when the bride is not a Muslim, obviously, because most likely her if a man is marrying the dhimmiya meaning a lady who's either Jewish or Christian, practicing, and her parents are probably not going to be that. Nor does the owner of a female slave need to be upright, meaning if someone's going to marry a lady who does not have her freedom, it doesn't, who the master is doesn't matter. It is a good person or a bad person, makes no difference whatsoever. And these are important. I get this question, so this is not something that we're going to talk about here. It doesn't exist in the text at all, so it's not important, but I'm just going to take a moment and just kind of side note. I get asked this question probably once every week, maybe more. The frequency of sometimes more than once a week, of marrying someone from outside the faith. Right, from marrying someone outside the faith. So let me just break it down very simply for you. For a woman, Muslim woman, no. The answer is absolutely not. She marries a Muslim man, period. That's it. A Muslim man marrying a non-Muslim woman, there are a few conditions for it to be acceptable. Number one, you have to be living in a Muslim country where the majority of this community are Muslims. When you're a minority, and you plan to stay in the place where you're a minority, it's not permissible. See, this is where context becomes important. This is where context becomes really important, understanding when the ahkam are being given. If you're living in a place and you're a minority, meaning your values, your customs, your principles, your deen is a minority, and you're going to marry a non-Muslim woman, and you plan to stay there, that's not permissible. It's not. It's permissible if you're living in a Muslim country, or if you marry a non-Muslim woman and you plan to go back to a Muslim country where you know that the culture or the society will be involved in raising your children. Your children, what they miss from their mother, they'll find from their community. But when you raise your children as a minority and their mother's not Muslim, now out of the three, you have only one thing going for you, which is you. As a man, your Islam is the only element affecting your children. The mother is not Muslim and the community is not Muslim. How much do you think a man's faith actually affects their children? Huh? Mothers, what do you think? 5%? Maybe not even that. Men are just regulators of behavior. We're just regulators. I'm just the guy who walks into the house and everyone straightens up and does their job because their mother has been trying to ask them to do it. My influence is very specific. It's very simple. They're not going to learn their deen through their father, unless the father's a stay-home father and the mother's a surgeon and she's doing something. Maybe certain dynamics would allow it. Maybe certain dynamics. But that's where this becomes. So you have to be living in a majority Muslim country or planning to, if that's the case. And number two, she has to be a practicing Christian or Jew. Practicing. Meaning someone, what does a practicing Jew or Christian actually do? Very similar to a Muslim woman. Very similar. Almost identical. If you study the Old Testament or the Bible, it's the same stuff. They're not supposed to drink, even though they do. They're not supposed to eat pork, even though they do. They're not supposed to be walking around forgetting their clothing at home, even though they do. It's not. This is a part of their deen. It's a part of their deen. They don't have extramarital sex, even though they do. This is a part of their deen. So you need to marry someone who's at least practicing for a certain majority of those basic ethics in order for it to be something that is acceptable. How many times have I seen it work here? I've been here for 10 years. How many times have I seen it work? Maybe 3 or 4 times out of maybe a couple of hundred. Out of a couple of hundred, you see me 2, 3, or 4 times where it works. This is a roll of the dice. When a man goes ahead and he does this in this country, you're rolling the dice with your future and the future of your children. It lacks wisdom. It lacks adherence to the faith. It lacks seriousness. And it most of the time doesn't really work out. So I don't, when brothers come and ask to help, I don't offer it. I say, no, you shouldn't be doing this. And if you're going to do it, I'm not going to be involved with you. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to write the kitab. I won't even come and attend it. This is your problem. Because once you fall, I need to be completely out of this so that I can actually, rub it in your face well and I told you so many, many times. Because if I go and attend it, then I can't do that anymore. It's very important. This is a problem. And I have to take that stand, not because I like to, but because I have to make people understand how serious this is. Because it makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference. You see how much it affects them and their children and the families involved. And you can barely get your children to be Muslim and speak Arabic and speak the language of your culture, even if you're not Arabic and you're from the subcontinent or you're from Bosnia or wherever. You want them to learn your culture, and that's your right, and you should make sure that that's a part of who they are. They shouldn't grow not knowing where they come from. They should know where they come from, so they speak the language, so they should celebrate the culture, they should be a part of who they are. It's very hard doing it when you have 2 people who are fully adherent to the same ideology and want to do it. It's very difficult. Imagine if you have someone who's not interested in this whatsoever. You're basically fighting almost. It's not going to work. And for women, it's just not. It's not there at all. And this comes quite every once in a while, and it's very difficult. And usually the way it comes is, he's going to convert. So I sit with the person and Yeah, and he'll just say whatever I tell him to say so that it's okay to get married. And I tell him, I'm not doing this either. Like that's not how this is done. If you're going to marry a convert, then that convert should take at least a year to 2 years to prove that they're Muslim. Like especially now, like maybe the turnover in the 70s and the 80s of people accepting Islam was low. The turnover today is very high. Like people enter and leave like all the time. It happens quite a bit because of just the world is different. The number of people has increased substantially, and just the way that we function has changed a lot, especially post 9/11. So it's not as easy anymore. So I just don't agree with it, and I tend to step away. This is a difficult and controversial issue. It's not addressed here in the Matan at all, but I thought it would just bring it out for your own knowledge. And if you have people struggling with that, then you need to find help for them. Even though I'm saying this, and I come from a marriage where my mother was a convert, and I'm saying this to you. This is what I'm coming to you to tell you. This is not a joke. It's not a game. It's very serious. It's very difficult. It needs a lot of work. And in today's era, because people come to me because they know that they think I'll be more lenient, and I've seen it so many times. When you see something fail so many times, you'd be an idiot just to continue to allow it to happen every single time and not tell people this doesn't work. When you've seen it not work for so many different reasons, just for so many different reasons. My mother was a practicing Catholic. She was a practicing Catholic, which is a very rare thing, by the way. She comes from a family of 6 people, which is, how many white families have 6 people? They were practicing Catholic. She went to Kenya with like the missionary sisters. Like she was very, very devoted to her faith, and she changed based on that devotion. So it was a specific scenario that existed in a certain time. By the way, this is back in the 80s, so it's a very different world. You cannot, in any form or manner, compare the 80s to 2020. No, the world has changed a lot. We know that as Muslims, and others know that as well. And I'll end with that, inshallah ta'ala. So that's what the wali and shahidan require. So just let me point out a few things here. So for the 4 schools of jurisprudence, fathers specifically are able to marry off their young daughters and young sons without their permission, both. So it's not just for the daughters, also for the son. Meaning the father, 2 fathers, Islamically, back in the day, 4 schools of jurisprudence, it was acceptable for fathers specifically, not uncles, and we'll talk about what that's important, because once the one guardian is not there, you move to another guardian. So the father, the grandfather, and then the uncle, and then you keep on moving, just like with the asaba, just like the universal inheritors. You can go from one person to the other. It was going to be the wali. So only for the father would they be allowed to marry off their younger children, whether it's someone, and that's how my grandfather got married. He was maybe 12 or 13. My grandmother was 14. They were married by their parents, and they just go for it. So this may sound to you as very foreign and weird. It's just because you come from a different time and you live in a different place. That's all this is to you. And honestly, if you want like the data, arranged marriages have better outcomes by far than all the stuff that we're doing here today. Like by far, in terms of the amount of domestic abuse, in terms of the rate of divorce, in terms of the actual satisfaction within the marriage itself. Just go to take a look at some of the studies that are out there. They come from all over the world, and it's not that different. Actually, they've proven that this actually works a little bit better than what we're trying to do here today. Not to say that this needs to come back. I'm just explaining to you where this comes from. It's specific. And it's based on the fact that لا يتهم الأب. لا يتهم means that you would never, there's no reason for anyone to question the father's motivation when he does this. A father cares about his son and his daughter more than anyone else in the world. So when they're marrying people, they're doing it out of the fact that this is going to work. This is the right person, this is the right family, they will treat you well, they will take care of you, this will work for you, you'll make you happy in your life. So it's acceptable for the father. For others, they may not have that same wisdom, and they may not love the person as much, so it's not permissible. But for the father specifically, it is permissible. This has specific context to it, both cultural and legal. But it is there. If you study a madhab, you'll find it there. Don't lose your mind. This is a part of Islamic ruling. It's been there for a long time. Still, the father is recommended to go for permission for both, but if he doesn't, he's still allowed to do that, unless there's some reason legally for that not to be the case, which actually did change within the Islamic Caliphate in the last 400 years. This ruling within the 4 schools of jurisprudence was overruled within the Ottoman Empire at a certain point because of the abuse, because they were observing the fathers not doing it for the right reason anymore, so they took it back again. But the reason that was there is because why would you accuse a father? A father is going to obviously look out for the best interest of his children. So a man is allowed to look at a woman's face and hands when the interest of marriage is made clear. He's actually allowed to look, and he's not required to do ghadd al-basar. He's allowed to look to see if this is something that he's... And the woman is allowed to do the same, so vice versa. The same thing is acceptable, and this is something that they talk about in all 4 schools of jurisprudence, and they clarify in terms of what you're allowed to look at from a lady, and what a lady is allowed to look at from a man in certain situations. And outside of marriage, if she's a mahram, you can look as much as you like, as long as you don't look between the bosom and the navel, or and some say, the bosom and the knee, and some say from the navel to the knee. But depending on the school of jurisprudence, for the Shafi'i is from the navel to the knee. But for marriage interests, looking at the woman's face and hands. The concept of hair is not a part of the Shafi'i method; it's a part of other madhahib. For other madhahib it is. I mean, he can look at her, he can see her without a hijab on. For the Shafi'i, it's usually someone else will do that for you. Meaning you wouldn't go look at her yourself, but someone else would. The Prophet ﷺ would tell the Sahaba, did you look at her? You see her, you actually see what she looks like? And if they said no, he said, no, go take a look. Make sure that you see her face and you see, just so that, the point of all this is to make sure that the probability of marriage working out is higher. Right? Marriage is just a game of probabilities. That's what it is. You could do everything wrong and things will work out. You could do everything right and things won't work out. Just that could happen. It's very rare, but it can happen. But because what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a union that will work, so you try to get in your favor all of the aspects that will allow this to succeed. So you try to increase the probability of this working out. So the way you do that is that you look for your proper family. There's a guardian. There are witnesses. The man has seen the woman, so if he knows that the attraction is there. At least he finds the chemistry when that's the case. And then adding to that, if the intention of marriage is clear, having meetings where they can talk about things in public spaces or in the house of the lady is completely acceptable. That's totally fine for them to sit and to speak and to talk in places where it's public, where the interest of marriage is clear and it's obvious, to talk and they speak with ma'ruf, meaning they don't talk about, they're not diving into the romance, because that will be left until this has become basically established. Before that, just figuring out, are we going to be able to get along? What do I do for a living? What do you do for a living? How are we going to make this work? How is the house going to look like? Who's going to do what? What are your values inside your home? What are mine? Just figuring out. There's no right and wrong in these things, by the way. You see this? This is why I'm explaining. I'm doing all this. This is a bit of a tangent. These are the only integrals. That's it. That's it. As long as there's a sigha and the mahr, that's it. Two people are married. It's very simple. Happens immediately. So how do you make something work? Well, then it's based on a lot of other stuff. It's whatever works for both people. It's whatever works for them. The rights and obligations, I'll explain it, inshallah, they're coming in within the matan. But the actual integrals, or the arkan, the pillars of a marriage are very simple. Just a couple of things you need, and then people can get married. But understanding that a lot more goes into it to make sure that it actually works. The wording for a marriage contract is specific for the three schools, which is the Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali, and can be initiated by either party for the Hanafis. So for the Hanafis specifically, they're okay with either party initiating it, and I'll explain what that means. So for the Shafi'is, the wording is of either zawajtuka or ankahtuka is needed for a valid contract. So how does this work? If you've attended a marriage, you know how this works. I don't do katib kitab, and this is like a strict policy. I don't do it. I don't have I didn't get the marriage. So I can't actually initiate a marriage, and I did that on purpose, and I'll never do it. But every once in a while, someone forces me as a friend to do the katib kitab shar'i, and then they go do the other thing. And sometimes I can't say no just because of who the person is, and it's just hard. So I did this for a friend of mine, and we sit. So what happens is the father, the guardian, and then the aris, the groom, sit. And then basically we have to have a sigha, we have to have the wording initiated properly. So for the Shafi'i, Maliki, and Hanbali, the guardian begins by saying ankahtuka or zawajtuka. Right? Ankahtuka means I offer you in marriage, or I offer you in marriage in both like that's what it means. And then the groom will say qabiltu, I accept. Okay? So I'm going to do this for two people. And it wasn't the father, because the father had passed away, it was the brother. And could this brother, with any power in the universe, say the word ankahtuka? No. He could not say these words. He could not put those letters together. It was kakahtuka, nakahtuka. No, just listen to me. And I had to actually, at the end, I wrote it down. I transliterated it in English. I wrote A-N-K, UKA. Just say that. Say that. I need you to say. If you don't say it for the Shafi'is, it's not valid. Like you actually have to say the word. Or zawajtuka. I could have done that, but at that moment I wasn't thinking about it. I was taught my scholars to use this word here. It took me like a good 3 or 4 minutes. By that time, everybody in the room was like laughing so hard that I don't even know. Allah yasmihni. That was not a good day. I don't do this for a living, and I'll never do it. And I learned my lesson after doing that one. But he could not say this word for the life of me or his either. But for the Hanafis, you can always do it the opposite. Interestingly enough, the Hanafis, it's okay for the man to come and say, يعني زوجني or أنكحني ابنتك, offer me your daughter in marriage. So and then the father says قبلت, I accept, and then they talk about the mahar. So for the Hanafis, that's acceptable. And funny enough, this happened once years ago. I was attending, but I wasn't doing the officiation. I was just attending, and the sheikh had the father, who was an old gentleman in the 70s, and the groom. So he's telling the father to say, okay, say behind me, أنكحتك, I offer. He said, no. He has to ask me. I'm the father of the bride. I don't offer him anything. He has to ask me. So the sheikh is trying to explain, Ya Habibi, this is what you have to say for the and he wouldn't do it and he wouldn't do it. So I came to the sheikh and I just whispered, let's do this like as a Hanafi officiation, and just let the guy say it because this was going to end, like the whole marriage was going to completely stop because this gentleman was like, no, I don't offer him anything. What do you mean offer him? He has to ask me, and then I have to say yes or no. So we had to kind of play it all around, and we did it the other way for the old gentleman to accept it, which is funny because the 3 madhahib out of the 4, this is what you do. The father speaks or the guardian speaks, and then the groom accepts. But for the Hanafis, either party can initiate the wording, and it's applicable and it's acceptable. Yes, go ahead. Amazing question. I didn't want to talk about that because it's hard for the majority of the schools, yes. For the Hanafi specifically, they're okay if the people cannot say the words at all, to say it within their language, but the wordings have to be explicit. I think I have that here. Do I have explicit wordings for it? Again, I did take some things out. Yeah. So some wordings have to be there are explicit words like nikah and zawaj. If you say something else, it doesn't apply. So the words have to be explicit. I mean, specifically marriage, offering me in marriage in a different language, acceptable for the Hanafis. For the rest, you can do it in the other language, but it has to be done at least certain words have to be said in Arabic in order for an Islamic marriage to work. Just because those are the words that are in the Quran, and they're taken from the Quran. They're just the Quranic words that are being extracted for the people to use, so that the contract is, under the eyes of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. And today, again, so this is one of the examples where today the 4 madhahib don't necessarily require the language to be the case. Like they're okay with it today, but that's in a modern opinion. It's not an old opinion. Back when this was written, that wasn't the opinion. It was only the Hanafis were okay with it being in different languages. And honestly, when it comes to languages, the Hanafis were way ahead of everyone else. When it comes to languages, they're way ahead of everyone else in many aspects. Funny enough, not in Jumu'ah, but in every other thing, they were much open when it came to what language is used. But the Hanafis were not open for it in Jumu'ah. Like the Jumu'ah khutbah had to be in Arabic. So if you're from the subcontinent, you know that in your country where no one speaks Arabic, only the Imam gets on the minbar and starts to speak Arabic because they were very strict when it came to the fard. The fard had to be done in Arabic, and everything else you can make dua in salah in English, in Urdu or whatever, or Bangla or whatever language you had. And the same thing goes in English. But today, the 4 schools of jurisprudence have really moved a long way from that when it comes to languages because of the number of Muslims who have entered Islam from different backgrounds. Okay, so that's just kind of understanding how this works. And you can look up, I didn't put it here, but if you're interested, maybe I can post like a standard marriage contract, just so you get a sense of it. I was going to do it and then I forgot. So I'll post it for you if you want to take a look at what it looks like and how it actually works. But when the wording happens, you say زوجتك ابنتي, and then you name her. يعني على مهر قدره, and then you point out the exact amount of the dowry. وعلى سنة الله ورسوله, and then the person says قبلت تزويجك ابنتك فلانة على مهر, the same amount of dowry, وعلى سنة الله ورسوله, and then that's it. And as long as there's 2 witnesses, we're good. You don't even need a written paper. Like back in the day, no one wrote anything. It was just 2 witnesses, who shahiday adlain, people who had certain status, and the guardian and the groom, and of course the acceptance of the bride, unless she was very, very young and the father was doing it. Otherwise, it was going to happen, and that's it. People now are actually married. And I'll explain some differences that we have culturally between Katb Kitab and marriage in a moment. But let me just move a little bit forward before we do that. So the bride's guardian. So here it's very similar. If you remember, if you just go back to the asabat when we talked about the universal inheritors, it's almost the same. It's almost the same sequence. قال وأولى الولاة الأب ثم الجد أبو الأب ثم الأخ للأب والأم ثم الأخ للأب ثم ابن الأخ للأب والأم ثم ابن الأخ للأب ثم العم ثم ابنه على هذا الترتيب فإذا عدمت العصبات فالمولى المعتق ثم عصباته ثم الحاكم. So rightful guardianship for the marriage contract is determined according to the following order: the father, the paternal grandfather, the full brother, the consanguine brother, a full brother's son, a consanguine brother's son, a paternal uncle, and a paternal uncle's son. This is how it kind of goes down. When the bride is a formal slave, if a male universal inheritor does not exist, then the guardian is the one who freed her, following by the emancipator's universal male inheritor, and then in the absent all others, a judge. Again, what's the point of having a guardian? The guardian is the one who is going to kind of size up the person who's coming asking for marriage. This is an important aspect of things. Sizing up a man for marriage needs the eyes of a man to do it. The eyes of a woman will see certain things, will miss other stuff. Just like it works the other way. Men have to size up men to see if this person is going to treat the woman properly, if this person can be trusted, if this person has the characteristics that will make sure that this lady will be safe with him for the long run. That is the point and the goal of having a guardian, is making sure that someone is sizing this gentleman up and making sure that they know that they're being judged. It's okay, by the way. I mean, this whole idea, men have to be judged all the time. They have to be judged on a daily basis by all the men around them, or they will not size up, they won't straighten up and do their job. It's just how the male mind works. And I think there's a certain degree of misunderstanding of that aspect in today's society. Men, without being continuously sized up and judged and looked at and held accountable, will not do their jobs eventually. Eventually, they will become lazy and they'll find shortcuts and they'll stop doing what they need to do. It's just an aspect of male behavior. So having guardians is there to remind the person that this is an ongoing process. You are going to be continuously watched over. And of course that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the raqib, but this is again, you're adding to the probability of success something. You're putting something in the probability of success part of the scale to make sure that this person kind of understands that. So this is why this is important for there to be a guardian. Guardians were never actually fully, this concept is not there to control women and their marriage. Because here's the caveat to this from a legal perspective, Islamic legal perspective, meaning talking about how things worked out in early Khilafah. If a decent young man comes and asks for the hand of a woman in marriage, and the guardian, the father, says no, and the daughter challenges that. Most daughters didn't challenge their fathers. Like, okay, if he doesn't want him, then she trusts her father and she loves her father. Her father says no, then he must have seen something in this gentleman, is not worth it, I don't care. I'm not attached to anybody, I'm not going to invest myself emotionally in anyone that my father doesn't think is a good fit for me. So but if for some reason this father was not like that, and she did want to challenge, then she could take that to the judge. And then the judge would have to bring the father with witnesses and say, okay, what are the reasons that Fulan is not a suitable groom for your daughter? And he would have to give reasons. And if he didn't give good reasons, then the hakim would remove his guardianship. The judge would remove his guardianship, take his guardianship into his own hands, and marry the bride off to the gentleman who came and asked, if that's what was her wish. And that's how it worked during the Prophet ﷺ's time as well. So men who would use their authority here, or use their guardianship as means to control women, that legally that could be taken away. It could be removed if the woman was felt like he's not allowing me to get married for reasons that have nothing to do with the person in front of me. I've seen examples like that in the past. I don't know if I can judge that it really works nicely or not, but I can understand when the reasons are completely unacceptable. When the reasons are racial, for example. I mean, I just won't offer my daughter in marriage to, and I'm not talking about racial problems here, right, for different countries. I'm saying like back in the village where it's just from a different family. Literally, you're living in the same, it's the same area, but just different family. No, I don't marry my daughter to someone from that family, period. And that's just, the person's coming in, he has all the right credentials, a good person, good family, well, and saying no. But even with that, because you need your blood, you need your family. Within marriage, for both men and women, you need the support of your family. When you don't have it, it's much more difficult. So it's a huge gamble when you decide to go completely against your family. It's always better not to use the legal system. It's always better to use relatives and people who have influence on them rather than the judge himself. Which again, I've seen happen, and some people make it work and some people don't. And it's a little bit sad when it doesn't. All right. So here are unmarriageable women. I mean, men do not marry, and this is important because this is Quranic stuff. So المحرمات بالنص 14 7 بالنسب وهن الأم وإن علت والبنت وإن سفلت والأخت والخالة والعمة وبنت الأخ وبنت الأخت. So there are 14 women who are unlawful to marry according to textual evidence. I never thought that there would come a time in my life where I had to actually explain these things and make sure everyone understood them as well. I never thought that the time would come in the world where incest would become something that everyone thought was cool and celebrated and existed on, in popular media and was being slowly normalized by certain groups. I never thought, I understand people not accepting certain rulings of religious background, but for this to be something that is now challenged, that it's not, this is very weird and it's just disgusting, honestly. But we have to, I think it's important to understand it. I can't tell you, I'm someone who enjoys good art, and I do like watching theater and cinema. I enjoy watching stuff. I like a good story, and I think it tells a lot about the human experience. And it's very hard now. It's very, very hard to find something to watch where incest has not been shoved into it artificially, meaning during that time there was no incest. I've studied history books that didn't happen. That didn't happen. You didn't need to put it in there, but they put it in there anyways, and they basically flesh it out quite a bit, and they go into details trying to normalize a behavior that is just forget about going against every aspect of religious text in the world historically, but it also goes against good medical judgment. Like you will not find a biologist or a physician or anyone who's studied any aspect of science will say this makes any sense at all. So among mothers and all her ancestors, daughters and all their descendants, a sister, a maternal aunt, a paternal aunt, the daughter of one's brother, and a daughter of one's sister. These are the 7 who a man does not, these are the maharim, these are the ladies that you can sit with without wearing hijab, and you're involved, you can be their guardians, and you can be a part of them. So they're not people that you're allowed to marry under any circumstances. I don't care if 2 people were separated at childhood and find themselves later on and they're attracted. I don't care. I do not care. It does not make a difference. They just don't marry each other, period. And that's the end of the discussion, yes. So paternal from your father's side and maternal from your mother's side. And these are the 7 that it's haram to marry. وَاثْنَانِ بِالرَّضَاعِ الْأُمُّ الْمُرْضِعَةِ وَالْأُخْتُ مِنَ الرَّضَاعِ. And they are unlawful as a result of nursing or breastfeeding. So the mother through nursing and the sisters through nursing. I'll explain that in a moment in terms of how that works in the larger picture. But generally speaking, if a child is nursed or breastfed by a woman, that woman will now be someone who's muharram to him, and you'll have a sister that's also going to be unlawful for him to marry. This actually makes a big difference in small villages, where women all sit together, they have children, and everyone's breastfeeding everybody. And after 20 years, the guy wants to get married, and half of the sisters in the village are his sisters, but he can't get married anybody. There was a gentleman I used to know in my village who literally could not find a lady to get married. His mother was one of those older ladies who always had children and just did rada to everybody, and they had to actually go and find him a person from a different village altogether, because he had looked into 5, and all of them turned out to be his sister. So this actually makes a difference if it's not watched closely. وأربع بالمصاهرة أم الزوجة والربيبة إذا دخل بالأم وزوجة الأب وزوجة الابن. And 4 are unlawful as a result of marriage. So the wife's mother, once a man marries a woman, her mother is haram for him for the rest of his life. Doesn't matter if they stay married or if they don't. Doesn't make a difference. And the wife's daughter from a previous marriage, when one has consummated the marriage with her mother. So once you marry a woman, her mother and her daughter, that's it. They will never be, they're muharram for you for the rest of your life. And the wife of one's father and the wife of one's son. So if your father remarried a woman, then she's haram for a man regardless of whatever happens in life. It's in the Quran. Obviously all this is Quranic verses. I'm not going to require you to memorize the evidence, but it's all in the Quran. And you cannot marry the wife of your son, regardless of what happens. وواحدة من جهة الجمع وهي أخت الزوجة ولا يجمع بين المرأة وعمتها ولا بين المرأة وخالتها ويحرم من الرضاع ما يحرم من النسب. And one is unlawful from the perspective of having more than one wife, so the wife's sister, so you can't marry 2 sisters, and one also cannot join between a woman and her paternal aunt or maternal aunt, so you can't marry a lady and her sister, or a lady and her aunt from either side. That's not permissible Islamically, because there's always going to be a little bit of difficulty when there's more than one wife, so you don't want to ruin arham by putting two sisters against each other, or a lady and her aunt. So it's haram to do that. And whatever is unlawful with blood relatives is also unlawful with relatives through nursing. And this is a very short sentence, but it's important, and it should definitely be kind of talked about a little bit. I did point out here some of the verses that talk about these things. You can take a look at them within if you want to know some of the evidence behind it. 5 filling breastfeeding sessions are needed for there to be unlawful rulings through breastfeeding. So it has to be 5 sessions. It can't be the lady picked up the child and he suckled for a few moments and then he fell asleep. That doesn't count. It has to be 5 stomach or gut filling sessions. And that's something that women who are breastfeeding understand what that means. The child is hungry, so he's going to go through a full breastfeeding or nursing session that has to have 5 times. This is the number for the Shafiis, and for most of the madhab, with some difference of opinion, that doesn't matter. We'll stick to 5. And those 5, if there's happened, that khalas, now it's been established that this person is muharram bil rada', meaning there is unlawful rulings regarding marriage through breastfeeding. Siblings of the child who breastfed are not affected. So if I was nursed by a lady, then that lady is muharram to me, and all of her daughters are my sisters. But that doesn't apply to my brother. My brother doesn't care. He could marry the mother, which is weird, but still it's halal. I mean, there's different. Do understand the difference between weird and haram. They don't mean the same thing. Haram is haram. Haram is we weird. We talk about it socially and we kind of figure out what's the catch. But it's not. If it's not haram, it's not haram. But so for my brother, the lady that nursed me is not haram to him, nor are his daughters. So it doesn't unite 2 families in nursing. It's just the person who was involved in the nursing. And the same thing goes for the lady. If a lady was nursed by a mother, then all the siblings, all the male siblings, are haram because she is now their sister. But her sister isn't. So they can marry her sister, but not her specifically. Does that make sense? So it's the person who was nursed that is going to be now treated that way. Now, it goes beyond that. So if I was nursed by a lady, all of her daughters are not haram for me, and their daughters. And going down. So now I'm treated as if I'm a part of that family in terms of marriage. And the same thing goes for my children is fine because 2 siblings, if they have children, the children can marry. I know the Western community thinks it's weird, but it's not weird. It's normal and it happens all over the world. There's genetic predispositions within families. It's not a big deal. But I'm talking about the person themselves. So not only is it haram for me to marry my sister in nursing, but all of her descendants will also be haram to me specifically. Okay. And that's what he means by وَيَحْرُمُ بِالرَّضَاعِ مَا يَحْرُمُ مِنَ النَّسَبِ. So once you've been breastfed 5 gut-filling sessions, now you're treated as if you're part of that family moving forward. Okay, good. This is important. I'm glad you're understanding it. ويستحب تسمية المهر في النكاح فإن لم يسمى صح العقد ووجب المهر ب3 أشياء أن يفرضه الزوج على نفسه أو يفرضه الحاكم أو يدخل بها فيجب مهر المثل وليس لأقل الصداق ولا لأكثره حد ويجوز أن يتزوجها على منفعة معلومة ويسقط بالطلاق قبل الدخول نصف المهر. So let's explain these things. Is important. It is recommended to state the amount of the marriage payment in the contract. If it's not stated, it still works. It's mustahab, it's recommended. So if we say على مهر and we don't even point out what it is, the marriage still is valid. These people are married. Then how are we going to figure out the amount? So if it's not stated, the contract is valid, and the marriage payment is determined by one of 3 things happening. Number 1, the husband obligating himself to a specific amount, and the wife saying okay. So let's say they agreed to get married, they didn't point out the mahar, and then the husband says, how about this amount? If she says yes, then that amount is fine. If she says no, no, that's not, I don't like that, then the judge obligating a specific amount. And the judge will obligate an amount, and he will do that based on legal, certain legal information that he has. So he'll figure out the amount that is. That's why it's important to do it. It's better to do it up front, but it doesn't invalidate the contract. The contract is still valid if you don't specify the amount, because either you will agree to it later, or the judge will put it in, or if they consummate the marriage, then similar women becomes obligatory. This is called mahr al-mithil. This is a very important phrase in in Islamic law. Mahr al-mithl meaning the mahr that the common mahr that women are taking within that time. That's what she's going to be owed. And that average is usually determined by the imams who officiate marriage. You bring an imam who officiates marriage every week, he'll give you the average. He'll tell you this is the average that most people, if you break down, if you ignore the ones who are doing it very, very simplistically, like $1,000 or something, and then people who are out of their minds and they're going like in the 150 and 100,000, and you come back to, you'll find something that is mahr al-mithl, and then if they consummated the marriage and they couldn't agree, then they don't need a judge, they just go to the officiators who will tell them what mahr al-mithl is, meaning what a similar woman get is, and then that's what she is owed. Okay? So if the woman wants a specific amount of mahr, she has to kind of speak up before the contract has been written. And there's no barakah in actually increasing the mahr. It doesn't make a difference. Studies have shown that it makes no difference. Making a huge amount makes no difference at all. Doesn't prove anything to anybody. If anything, it just makes things more difficult later on. There is no minimum amount for the marriage payment, nor there is a maximum limit. Islamically, there is no minimum or maximum. It's whatever people agree to. It is permissible to marry a young woman using a known utility as the marriage payment. Meaning it could be a thing. It doesn't have to be money. It could be a car or a house, or it could be a favor, something that's going to be done for her, like in terms of maybe moving her from one country to the other, or maybe performing a specific, like for Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, right? He was going to take care of the father's business for around 10 years. And that was the mahr, and they agreed to it. So it's whatever people want to agree to, it's fine. And the marriage payment is reduced by half if the husband divorces her before consummation. So if people get divorced before they consummate their marriage, then only a half of the mahr is actually owed to the woman. وَالْوَلِيمَةُ عَلَى الْعُرْسِ مُسْتَحَبَّةٌ. This is pretty straightforward. I'll make some commentary in a moment, inshallah. وَالْوَلِيمَةُ عَلَى الْعُرْسِ مُسْتَحَبَّةٌ وَالْإِجَابَةُ إِلَيْهَا وَاجِبَةٌ إِلَّا مِنْ عُذْرٍ. Feast for the wedding is recommended. It's a recommendation. It's not a wajib. It's not an integral. It's not a rukn. It's not a pillar of marriage to have a walima. It's just a recommendation. These are important pieces of information because they really do matter. It is obligatory to answer the invitation unless one has an excuse. I mean, as a Muslim, you're obligated to go if someone asks you. That's why I tell you, if you like me, if you really like me, don't ask me to go to your wedding. Because I don't like going to weddings. If you ask me, I have to go because it's wajib, so I have to go to your wedding. But I don't want to. But don't ask me if you really like it. Just tell me that you got married, and I'll be happy for you, and I'll come and visit you and your wife or something later on. But it's because it's wajib. Like and it's not only for the Shafi'is, it's for the majority of schools of thought of jurisprudence where it's wajib to go and attend a urs if you've been asked to attend one. So what we've kind of come down to here, and there's some evidence there if you want to look at them. Okay, let's not go here yet. So here's the thing. So when they talk about khutbah in common culture, they talk about we want to come and do khutbah. What is khutbah in Islam? Khutbah is basically just saying that we're interested in marrying you. Like someone saying that to the family, or the man says it to the woman, or he says it to the father. We're interested in getting married. We see you to be people that we would like to introduce this idea. And if the father says, okay, preliminarily we're okay with that, that's khutbah. That's basically an engagement, or here it's different. I don't like using the words that they use here in the West because it's a completely different system altogether in how they look at these things. Islamically, once you've made the intention of marriage clear, that's khutbah. And khutbah, what's allowed, all that's allowed is that you can speak to this woman about issues that are attached or affiliated or associated with a marriage lifestyle. Where you can sit down with this person and start discussing. All right, this is what I do for a living, this is my hours, this is my time, this is what I look for, and she'll say, well, this is what I look for, and this is what I need, and this is what I expect, and this is what I hope for. So that conversation can occur. But it's already been made clear that there's an intention of marriage. That's khutbah. So people who are in khutbah, they don't go out together romantically. They don't. There's no physical contact. You can't see her without her hijab. Like that's not there yet, because this is just establishing whether this is actually going to work, whether it has all the elements that allow it to succeed. Katib kitab, where they sit down and they do the actual contract, that's marriage. That is marriage. That's full marriage. That's not okay. Now she's my fiancée. No, she is your wife. You just didn't consummate the marriage yet, that's all. But she's your wife and you're her husband, and you haven't consummated the marriage. Islamically, that's how this works. There's no such thing of, no, that doesn't exist. It's okay for us to do it in a certain way. Like the way we're doing it as Muslims today, it's not a problem. So you do a katib kitab, and then you don't consummate the marriage until maybe a year later. And in that period, people get to know each other and they spend time, but they can be romantic, and they can be physical, and they can see each other in certain, but they don't take it to the point where they actually consummate the marriage. But this becomes a little bit more tricky, because when you have that possibility, when both people understand Islamically that they've already fulfilled all of the pillars and integrals of marriage by just signing this contract and agreeing to the mahar and all that there, then really what's holding them back from living as a couple or doing what they want to do? Nothing aside from custom. Nothing aside from the custom of the society that they're living in, which is good for most cases, but it's not perfect, it's not bulletproof for a lot of cases. So having long periods of time between katib al-kitab and consummating the marriage is not smart. It's just not smart. It's not a good idea. It shouldn't be very long. It should be something that is agreed to very clearly, and it should be, the shorter the better. I went on for around 11 months, and that was not a good idea. And it was circumstantial, but it wasn't a good idea. It was too much time. You complicate something that's very simple by allowing too much time to go by without the couple being able to actually consummate their marriage and be together. What do they talk about beforehand? So before Katib Kitab, what are they allowed to talk about? They're allowed to talk about everything that is going to be related to their experience within the marriage. I mean, what they require and what they need. And that's what they should be talking about. A lot of people go to do this, and they go to the family, and they show, and we call it Rayt al-Fatiha, right? So Rayt al-Fatiha is basically khutbah, but there's nothing's really happened. So you can't really, again, there's no physicality, you can't really see anything, but you can talk. You can talk. And then you find the people not talking about the right stuff. So they come and they go, okay, what are you talking about? And they won't tell me because they don't want to tell me what they're talking about. No one does. I require them to tell me about the stuff they should. But that means you're not talking about the right stuff, because that's not what you're supposed to be talking about now. You talk about those things after Katib Kitab, because now she's your wife. Talk about what you want. But now at this early phase, it's not about that. This early phase is very simple. You just establish what your needs are. And she does the same. And then if you see eye to eye, then you move on to the next step, and then you can talk about these things that will become very specific to the couple. When I did this to get married, so I sat with my wife maybe for it was like 10 minutes before we got to get to that. I said, look, I'm a doctor and I run a masjid. I have very little time in the world. Like, my time is very limited. I'm very busy. I don't actually plan to make more time. I plan to even get busier. So I need someone to run the household and take care of it. That's how I'm going to be. I'll be in the hospital. I'll take care financially. Don't need you to do anything. I'll make sure you don't need anything. I'll sell a kidney if I need. Don't worry. Don't think about the money. I'll take care of that. Just let me. But I need someone who can run the house, because that's what I need. She said, okay, that's fine by me. I have two things to ask you. She asked me for two things. She said, I need you. I don't want to live with your parents in the same house. I don't want to leave the country. Within 12 months of marriage, she lived in my parents' basement in a different country. I came through with nothing of the two things she asked me for. She asked me two things. I came through with neither of them within 12 months of our marriage. And the moral of the story is, don't ask your husband for too much up front. It's not going to do it to him. Know what to ask for. Ask for the stuff that aren't circumstantial. Ask for the things that have nothing to do with circumstances. We ask for the stuff that matter to you that aren't going to be based on circumstances. Because if you ask for that, that's not based on. That's circumstantial. If you don't have money and you have to, you're going to sleep in the street, you'll go live wherever you can find life. You're going to leave and go wherever you need to go. And of course, at the time, things had not come to the point where we thought we were going to leave, but it's still. So it's just the moral story. When you're having these conversations, ask for what's going to matter to you, like what you actually need. Don't focus on stuff that you're afraid of or scared of. Explain your preference, but focus on the stuff that you actually require in order for you to live, and make sure that they're not circumstantial in nature. And that's just an important point to kind of remind yourself of. Okay, there's a big problem in this community when it comes to marriage. There's a huge problem when it comes to marriage. Marriage has become very, very difficult for everyone to get involved in. It's very hard. It's now asir. It's actually, and halal shouldn't be made difficult. The reason that this is simple, where you just have a guardian, a man, two witnesses, and a mahar that's agreed upon and is done, is because it's supposed to be something simple. It shouldn't be something complicated. It shouldn't be something difficult. And definitely, financially, it should not be blown out of proportion. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't. And the amounts of money that I'm watching being moved when people are getting married are ridiculous. It's huge amounts of money that are being required for young men to get married. And that's why women are getting married later. It's not in anyone's best interest for a woman to get married later. It's not in the best interest of the community. It's not in the best interest of the lady. And it's not even in the best interest of a man either. It's not in anyone's best interest for things to be delayed 10 years or 15 years because, well, the man doesn't have the money right now. Well, of course he's not going to have the money. He's 23. He's 23. I am 30-something. I'm 37. I still don't have money. Money comes later in a man's life. It takes a while for them to build up enough to make money. So if you want a lot of money, then you have to be looking at a different age group of marriage. You want a woman wants a lot of money to get married, then look at someone in their 50s. They have the money and they have the ability to do it. You want someone that you want youth. Usually youth doesn't come with money. Usually, unless the person is inheriting a lot, copious amounts or their parents are very, very rich, which is a very small portion of society. And honestly, those don't always work out too well anyways. Because if you want marriage to work for a long period of time, you actually have to build that wealth with your spouse. And that has to be something that you both remember, that the days where it was difficult and you were perseverant and you stood by each other, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted you and you moved forward. So what's the father's role in all of this? He's looking to see the man who is going to be loyal after all that happens. That's what we do. To see, is this guy the type of guy who will use your youth, and the moment he has it, he'll kick you out and get someone else. That's what we're here for. You can't see that as a woman. Most women, it's impossible. Maybe the mother can, but when you're young, it's hard for you to see that. It's just not something you're able to pick out. But fathers can, and that's important because that's what's going to matter in the long run. Yes? Yeah. Yes, they can meet in private because now there are spouses. She is his wife and he is her husband. They can do whatever they want. Now, they shouldn't consummate the marriage because there are certain things that the customs of the society allow for. And I get asked this questions always. We did our katib kitab. We already put it in why can't? There's no reason why you can't. But if you do that, you're going to ruin your wedding, and it's going to bother your spouse. It's going to bother her family. It's going to bother you. It's not a good idea to consummate before you actually have your wedding. It's just not a good idea. It doesn't work out in the long run. It doesn't. That's why it's important that we kind of watch out for these things. So today we do have an issue when it comes to marriage. We have an issue with the amount of mahr that's being asked for. We have an issue with a lot of other stuff that are attached to marriage that shouldn't be attached, that are not a part of it. Like we talk about, mahr, and then there's, how much gold and how much clothing and how much. There's no such thing in Islam. What do you mean? This is stuff that are going to be added if the groom wants. Or you just ask for a bigger mahr. You take half of it up front and you use it to buy all the stuff that you want to buy. But for there to be all these extra things, you have to give a mahr, and then you have to buy this, and you have to buy that, and you have to buy this. Islamically, none of that is there. All the man owes is a mahr. The man doesn't even owe to pay for the wedding. He doesn't have to pay for a wedding at all. He's given the mahr, he's done his part. That's it. Everything that we're doing today is just additional stuff that the society has brought on as as more obligations, but it's not a part of this. You'll find nothing here. The man, what he's obligated to do is to do a walima. He's obligated to feed people at the expense of or for the fact that he's getting married. What the bride wants to do and for her own day, for a special day, is up to her basically. So it's important to kind of talk about these things, and I haven't talked about them a lot. That's because my siblings aren't all married off, so I don't want to sound it to be self-serving. But once they're married, I'm going to rip into this community so hard that no one's going to know who I am anymore. The moment that they're married and it's not self-serving anymore, because this is a problem. Because I'm seeing my sisters and my brothers grow up year after year after year, and they're not getting married, and that's a problem. That's a pandemic. That's an issue that needs to be dealt with. That's not healthy. It's not healthy for a community for that to be the case. And when you dig in, you find that the reasons are for the majority of is financial. Majority of it is financial. It's a lot of money that's required that shouldn't be required. That requires rewiring of all of our brains in terms of how we're supposed to see marriage from the male perspective and the female perspective. And then other issues is that we don't understand our obligations inside the household anymore. And no one likes how things, no one wants to do anything anymore. And we're not willing to sacrifice, we're not willing to put in the effort, and we're just not willing to do that anymore. And that's a different uphill battle that we have to have. But I think at least the financial piece needs to be addressed appropriately, because that's not Islamic in any way. The Prophet ﷺ zawwaj with khatam hadid, with a metal ring, or with Quran. The mahr was Quran. Ali Imran, he doesn't know it, you teach her Ali Imran. He looked for simple ways to get people together and allow them to be cherished and celebrated and enjoyed and to be in marriage. And it's a very important thing that we reconsider here. All right. Let's move on now a few more. So al-khul', this is important. And the reason I talked about that is because now we're going to move on to something a little bit less enjoyable. قال والخلع جائز على عوض معلوم وتملك المرأة به نفسها ولا رجعة له عليها إلا بنكاح جديد ويجوز الخلع في الطهر والحيض ولا يلحق المختلعة الطلاق. So this is important, yes. Yeah, so again, maybe you weren't here at the beginning. So for the rest of the text, I'm going to be choosing paragraphs as we go along. And you're only obligated to know the paragraphs I'm pointing out because a lot of it is not as relevant and it's very old and outdated. And I don't think there's a need to go through every single paragraph. I'll just choose what I think you should know definitely. So it's permissible for a husband to release his wife in exchange for a known item of service. Through it, the woman takes sole control of herself and the husband is not entitled to take her back without a new contract. Release for compensation is permissible during times of purity and menstruation. A woman who has been released for compensation cannot be divorced. Al-khul' is when the lady wants to leave the marriage. She doesn't want to be married anymore. So she's demanding that the husband release her from this contract. So the contract, and we'll talk about that in the future, in the next session. The contract of marriage, the control of keeping onto it is in the hands of the man unless specified otherwise in it. Meaning if you specify in the contract that the isma is in the hand of the lady, then she controls the marriage. She can release the husband anytime she wants. It is not specified, the man is the one who holds on to the marriage, but he's the one who kind of initiates the divorce, not the woman. But one of them has to. It can't be both, it has to be one. So either goes to the lady or stays by default to the man. So if she wants to get married, when she wants to get khul', then she can do that. It can be an agreement that I give you back a certain amount of the mahr, or I give you this and you release me from this. I don't want to be married to you anymore. And the Prophet ﷺ initiated that many times during his life. And once that happens, the woman takes control of herself. Because we'll talk about the iddah of talaq. Because during the iddah of talaq, if there's a divorce, the man can always say, I want to take you back, meaning we're going to go back again. And he has the ability to do that. But once there's khul', he doesn't. She owns the whole story. If she wants to go back, she can do that. I mean, now she's the one in control. So she can actually go back and continue this marriage within the time of the iddah, within the time that we'll talk about inshallah next time. Or if she wants to just run it through because she doesn't want to go back, then that's up to her as well. So she becomes the one in control. And she can do that whether she is during a time of purity or menstruation, doesn't make a difference. Khul' can happen anytime the woman wants. And once she does that, the man cannot say, I divorced her anymore. He can't use the wording of divorce. He can't say, طلقتك, it's done. The khul' has happened, they've agreed, she owns herself now she's the one who's going to initiate divorce, not the man anymore. And that happens quite a bit. And usually legal systems get involved when it comes to khul'. Meaning the woman goes to the legal system and she wants khul' and she can ask for it. And if she has the right, the reasons are acceptable, it can happen against the man's will without him consenting. And if there are no good reasons, then it has to be through the consent of the man or an agreement where there's something being given No, khul' is one time. Yeah, it's a one-time thing. And it's treated as if it's a full talaq. So it's treated as if it's a full divorce. Okay, I think we have. So just know these, and I'll talk about them next time, inshallah. والطلاق ضربان صريح وكناية فالصريح ثلاثة ألفاظ الطلاق والفراق والسراح ولا يفتقر صريح الطلاق إلى النية والكناية كل لفظ يحتمل الطلاق وغيره وتفتقر إلى النية. This is important because I'm going to rant about this for a little bit next time. So divorce is of two types, explicit and elusive. 3 phrases are explicit. If they use the word talaq, divorce, or firaq, separation, or sarah, parting, then you don't need an intention. Explicit phrases do not require intention in order for a divorce to take place. So if he says talaqtuki, or sarrahtuki, or faraqtuki, then whether he's joking or he's not joking, or he said it when he was angry or didn't mean it, doesn't make a difference. Now the first aspect of talaq occurred because he used the explicit words. Elusive, meaning if you use phrases that convey a meaning in addition to a divorce, are elusive. Elusive phrases require intention. So if he says something else, يعني الحقي بأهلك, go to your family's house, well, it depends on what he meant. Do you mean divorce? Then it applies. If you didn't mean divorce, then that's not going to be enough. But if you said طلقتك but didn't mean, no, the word is explicit. It doesn't matter whether you mean it or not. So I'll talk a little bit about that next time because it's very important. And I think today there's a lot of rulings within the legal system, within Islamic law that have changed. This is one of the areas where Islamic law has grown. So you can't say that Islamic law hasn't grown in the last 200 years. No, because this is an area where in the last 100 years it's grown substantially, and there's a lot of different rulings today that the four madhab actually adopted that they didn't have maybe just a century ago. And we'll talk about them inshallah a little bit. Next time, subhanallah bihamdik, shadu la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruk.